Hello and welcome back to the Audience Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Hewitt from Castos. I hope everyone out there is faring all right with the coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic. I know a lot of us thought we were near the end of the tunnel, and it seems like we might have a bit further to go with this. So I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy and happy during these times. I, for one, am glad that we have podcasts to turn to and that we're able to express ourselves and share how we're feeling and what's going on in our lives through this medium. Today, we're going to be talking about video podcasting. One of the most popular questions we get is, should I be putting my podcast on YouTube? Or should I do a video podcast, or should it be audio only? And I don't think there's a single right answer to this, but what we're going to talk through are some things to think about, some reasons why you should think about doing a video podcast, maybe some reasons not to, but I think the prevailing wisdom is you should have some sort of video component and video presence to your podcast in some form. And the question just is, how do you do that? And what is the best way for you and your show and your content to connect with your audience on platforms like YouTube? The thing that listeners to this show will know is that we've referenced the Joe Rogan podcast several times, right? Its acquisition by Spotify for $100 million was a big deal in the podcasting space, and folks like Tom Webster from Edison Research and the previous episode said that Joe's show is by far the biggest podcast in the world. And what he said and what a lot of other people say is Joe Rogan's podcast is so big in large part, not entirely, but in large part due to the fact that it's on YouTube, or it has been so far. So I think you could go to that and say, okay, at least a single point of data here about what a really successful podcast is means that that podcast is on YouTube. So, it's not necessarily a rule because it's a single data point, but that is one very good example to say the biggest podcast out there is on YouTube, has a lot of YouTube viewers, and ways that people consume the Joe Rogan show is on YouTube. So we should think about doing that as well for our podcast. Some data by Oberlo says that 79% of internet users have a YouTube account. This is from 2019, and surely that number has gone up since then. So 80+% of people on the internet have a YouTube account and consume some content on YouTube on a regular basis. If you look at the percentage of folks in the U.S., at least, that have listened to podcasts recently, this 80% is much bigger than the number of active podcast listeners. So getting your podcast onto a platform like YouTube and having your content in video format surely could be a way to gain exposure to new listeners and new audience members and connect with them in a different way. 43% of podcast listeners say that they've listened to podcasts or watched podcasts on YouTube in the last year, and YouTube currently has 2 billion logged in users and growing every month, I'm sure. So with that being said, the next logical question for a lot of us is, okay, Craig, you got me. You've convinced me I need to have my podcast on YouTube. What are the ways that I can do this? And we're going to walk through a couple of ways that you can do this, and this is really the how, right? The why, I think we answered, and that is that there are just a ton of eyeballs and a ton of search traffic and a ton of real SEO juice, as YouTube is owned by Google, a ton of kind of link authority and domain authority and brand recognition can be attributed to having your podcast on a platform like YouTube. And so we're going to talk about maybe from the easiest to the hardest ways to get your podcast on YouTube. The easiest way, and we're going to kind of toot our own horn here, is Castos YouTube Republishing Plan. So our YouTube Republishing Plan takes an audio-only podcast, applies a static image to it, converts it to a video file, and publishes it to your YouTube channel automatically. Every time you publish a new episode, it takes about 5 minutes for us to process and crunch those zeros and ones, and then publishes that episode to your YouTube channel along with the show notes that you've created for that episode. And we can even assign this to a particular playlist. So in your YouTube channel, you might have a playlist for your podcast. All the episodes will go in that playlist, like our Audience Podcast has. And so you'll see in your channel the playlist created on all of your episodes there automatically. The great thing about this is it's totally automated. You literally have to make that connection from your Castos account to your YouTube channel once. And from there, every time you publish an episode, it's automatically creating that video with a fixed image on YouTube every time you publish an episode. So that's great because it's easy. It's on autopilot. You don't have to do anything. The con, honestly, is that it's a little less engaging to have a static image there than it would be to actually have what we call native video. But the upside is you don't have to create that native video. You don't have to have a camera. You don't have to have a webcam. You don't have to be in a great looking place with a cool backdrop. You can be in your PJs or late at night or whatever when you're recording your podcast. And because it's audio only, it's okay. Nobody's ever going to see what you look like when you're podcasting, or see your background, or see your guest and their background and the scene they're in. So I think this is the easiest way for that reason, is that you don't have to capture native video, because video is really hard. When we do videos for our YouTube channel, it honestly is stressful and takes a lot of time and is really, really intense, to be honest. As opposed to podcasting, I can hop on and flip the mic on here and record for 10 or 20 minutes. And it's pretty easy. I've been doing it a long time, so maybe that's it. And I haven't been doing video as long. But I think most people you talk to will say that, yeah, podcasting audio is really easy. Podcasting video or doing webinars or doing videos is a little more intense because you have both the audio that you have to get right and the video and the scene and the lighting and the camera and the sound and all this that have to really meld together very nicely. So creating native video content is hard. I won't lie to you. So if you're saying, Craig, I get it, I need to be on YouTube, but I don't want to record myself on video, then maybe a feature like Casto's YouTube republishing is something to check out. However, if you do want to record yourself podcasting, the next kind of layer of recording this, I would say, is to record yourself podcasting. So, and there's really two flavors of this that I'll throw out there. And one is like an in-studio recording. So if it's you and another person podcasting in like a podcasting studio, or you have a home studio that you've set up, you have a camera set up kind of to the side or in front of you that is recording kind of your whole setup of you podcasting. And this is really great. Maybe this is like what a news anchor would look like. That's the kind of vibe that you would get, or like seeing somebody in a recording studio, and that kind of look is what this would be. The other option for those of us that podcast at our computer, which I think is the majority of us, is to use your webcam to record from your computer monitor you on a tool like Squadcast or Zoom or Zencastr. And so with all these tools, you can record video that comes from your webcam, and you can use that for either just you or you and your guest or guests to be the video component of your podcast. When I do record video, this is how I do it. I typically don't have an external camera set up to record kind of me at my computer to where you can see all of that. It's just me coming from my computer using the webcam that I use at my computer for video conferences and stuff, and then I use my regular podcasting mic. So that, I guess that's kind of taking a step back, is I used my regular podcasting mic, my Audio-Technica ATR 2100, for all of the content I create, whether it's an audio-only podcast or it's a video, and I think this works plenty well. You don't need to go get a separate mic just for video. You certainly could. If you're a gearhead and you want to go spend a few $100s, you can go get a shotgun mic or a lavalier mic. It certainly is not absolutely necessary. I think this mic does a plenty good job to record video, especially when it's me sitting at my computer recording content in the same kind of setting and environment that I normally create content in. So that's recording native video content of you where you're podcasting normally. For most of us, it's at our computer. You can either set up an external camera to capture kind of you, and if you're podcasting with someone else in the same room, to capture the two of you in the same place, or if you're podcasting with someone in a different location with a tool like Zoom or Squadcast or Zencastr, capturing that video from your webcam of just you kind of in front of your computer with the background behind you is the way to go. The next one is a bit of a combination of the interview, so kind of you talking with somebody, and then adding in additional B-roll footage there as well. And so I think that folks that do kind of indie filmmaking or have a real kind of video background might get into this, but this is, again, a bit more interactive, a bit more creative to capture that B-roll footage. It's typically another camera at a different angle, or capturing off takes when you're not actually creating the content, but you kind of setting up or making a mistake or something like that. And so the folks like to introduce those as short little snippets or transitions between segments. So this would be like an interview plus that B-roll would be another way that you could do video content for your podcast. So those are kind of the 4 different ways that we think that are pretty standard for folks to create video content for their podcast. So again, to recap, using a tool like Castos YouTube Republishing, where you record the audio podcast, we convert it with a static background image into a video file and publish it to your YouTube channel for you. The next 2 are kind of 2 different flavors of you capturing the video content of you doing a podcast interview, whether it's you and another person in the room and capturing that from an external camera, or if you're podcasting at your computer via a tool like, again, Zoom or Zencastr or Squadcast from your webcam and kind of the background behind you and your guest as well. And then the last would be a bit of that kind of interview look with B-roll footage, more of kind of maybe the narrative style podcast, but applied to video format. The next question that comes up is, okay, how do I edit and how do I produce a video podcast versus an audio podcast? Do they go through the same kind of editing process? Do I treat them differently? And the way that we do it with our customers at Castos Productions is to edit the video podcast first, just because you can't edit the video content quite as tightly as you can audio content, because the person would be all chopped up looking. And so we tend to edit a video podcast a little more fluidly and a little more in a conversational manner than we do the audio. So we can edit audio much more tightly and have it be really crisp, whereas a video needs to be a little more free-flowing. So we edit the video and get it already, add in things like what are called lower thirds and graphics and transition effects, as well as kind of an intro and an outro bumper to the video. Once we're happy with that, then we extract the audio out of that original recording and edit that audio podcast as we would a regular any audio podcast. So there's things like adding intro and outro and music and bumpers and ad spots. The same regular audio production process that you would go through for a regular podcast, we follow there. So do the video podcast first, edit it a little lighter than you would an audio podcast, but add those graphic elements to it, especially creating that thumbnail image that people see when they pull your podcast up on YouTube. You want to have, really descriptive things like the title of the episode and maybe your face or you and a guest, the title of your podcast, have it be really descriptive. So creating all of those visual elements for the video, then extract the audio out of that original recording or recordings, create the podcast you would normally and from an audio editing perspective, and then publish each of those separately. So the video goes to YouTube, the audio goes to your hosting platform like Castos to be then distributed to all the podcasting directories that you've submitted your show to. And of course, doing this and having a presence on a platform like YouTube will go a long way towards you being able to share YouTube as a place where people can check out you and your brand and your content. So it's not just, hey, check out me on this social media platform or go to my website here. It could be, hey, go subscribe to my YouTube channel. And once people do that, they'll be automatically notified when you have new videos. When they go to YouTube, your new content will be one that's suggested there. And with people following you on YouTube and consuming your content there, they'll be able to get to know you better and get to know your brand better. You gaining their trust will go a long way towards furthering your relationship with them. So it's kind of an overview of how we like to think about creating podcast content in video format. I think that creating native video content surely is the way to go if you can, if you have the equipment, if you have the setting and the backdrop that looks nice, if you have the gear, it is the way to go. It is quite a bit more work, I won't lie to you, but if you're able to do it, I think it's really worth a try. If you're not able to capture native video, then using a tool like Castos YouTube Republishing is a great way to get your audio-only content onto YouTube, get that kind of digital footprint on an enormous directory and place where people consume content. I think it's a no-brainer way to repurpose your content. So if you haven't already, check out Castos YouTube Republishing. So that's it from us on creating video content for your podcast. If you have any questions at all, shoot us a message. We're at Castos HQ on social media or castos.com. Thanks so much.